Hi, I'm Kristen Oaks-White.
And I'm Avery Davidson. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, the only TV show bringing Louisiana farmers and consumers together every week.
There are 11 million people living in Cuba. The vast majority of the food they eat is imported. But because of the trade embargo imposed by Congress in early 1960s, very little of that comes from the United States.
Congressmen from Louisiana and Arkansas traveled to Cuba with the hope of making connections and gaining support to end the trade embargo. The socialist nation, just 90 miles off the Florida coast, is already taking steps to encourage free enterprise. TWILA was the only media outlet invited on the trip to show you why trade with Cuba would be good for Southern agriculture.
150.
This is the birth of the free market in a socialist country. This is the El Trigal Cooperative Market, founded in December of 2013 by a group of 10 farmers. This is the place where growers can sell their crop once they've given the Cuban government its share. Upwards of 120 sellers are here every day, with 500,000 Cuban pesos changing hands. It's quite a sight for Louisiana and Arkansas farmers like Ted Glob and Joe Mercer on their first trip to Cuba.
You have buyers that have a specific demand, you have producers that produce that product or don't. How do you get the two to link together? Because this is the market, but this is the early days of the Chicago Board of Trade.
It's not just at the market where the 20 travelers on this trade mission feel like they've stepped back in time. This is the Rene Oreine Garcia Farm Co-op. Spanning 1,200 acres, it provides Cubans with milk, beef, pork, and the grains needed to feed those animals. Official Ambassador Juan Jose Leon tells the group that 127 farmers are part of this co-op, and all of them share this 1949 tractor. Leon says equipment and inputs have been hard to come by since the fall of the Soviet Union. When that happened, Cuba lost 80% of its trade over an 18-month period. Merrill Kennedy is president of Kennedy Rice in Mer Rouge, Louisiana, and sees where trade with Cuba could help this farm.
You know, the agricultural side is truly poorly developed, but they are doing extremely well for what they have. It's very apparent since the collapse of the Soviet Union that they have not had the resources that they needed. I mean, they made clear to us this morning that they haven't had really any new equipment in many decades, no fertilizer, no inputs whatsoever, or very limited inputs. And so really for what they've been able to produce with what inputs and they have, it's fairly remarkable, but there's still much to be done on the agricultural side and much development that can happen.
This meeting is where that development could begin. Congressman Rick Crawford of Arkansas, Ralph Abraham of Louisiana, and Louisiana State Senator Francis Thompson of Delhi speak at length with the North America Director for the Cuban Minister of Foreign Trade, Maria de la Luz Pamo. It's in that meeting where the two sides discuss the trade embargo, or blockade as the Cubans call it, and seem to find a breakthrough.
This embargo has outlived its usefulness, if it ever was useful, and we don't see the evidence that it has had any effect on punishing the Castros. In fact, it's really punished American producers, because we have then become the scapegoat for the Castro regime to say, look, the Americans won't play ball.
I think we got the opportunity of a lifetime. We're at the crossroads with a company, corporation, venture, and this island of Cuba that we can trade, have a partnership with them that can make a big financial difference in the southern part of the United States.
In Louisiana, we have the best cropland in the Delta that the earth can produce. We have some of the best farmers, certainly along with our colleagues in Arkansas and the other southern states. And we have the greatest quantity, but more important, we have the best quality in the world. They know that here in Cuba. They want that. We want to give it to them. So why not?
Back at the market, with the knowledge that Cubans import a vast majority of their rice, Mercer looks at what could be his competition.
We got rice right here. Just some locally grown rice. As you can see, pretty high content of brokens and some red rice, a lot of chalk. Anything we can compete against easily.
The president of the market seems to welcome the day when there is American rice sold here.
I would like to say to all of the people in the States that the people of Cuba, as we've always said, we have always been friends. We have never been enemies, and we are here waiting for you to participate in this market.
It's in the interest of Congressman Crawford to keep the Cubans as friends, not just for trade, but for protection.
As we've seen in the past, when we leave and we don't engage, many times a power vacuum develops and some bad actor comes in and fills that void. We're in a position to fill that void in a good way and build goodwill right here in our backyard, and I think that's the take-home message.
Congressman Crawford's bill, the Cuba Agricultural Exports Act, currently has 25 co-sponsors, including Congressman Abraham. In speaking with Crawford staffers on this trip, they tell me they need about 100 co-sponsors to have it go before the House for a vote, and they want most of those co-sponsors to be Republican. That's where you can come in. Crawford is asking you to call your representatives in Congress and ask them to support his bill. Now, while I was in Cuba, I witnessed a one-on-one connection that seemed to sum up the purpose of this trip. Here you see one of the workers at the Hotel Nacional taking down the Cuban flag for the evening. As he was doing so, Arkansas farmer Ted Glob saw that it was about to hit the ground and helped. He held the Cuban flag as the worker lowered the flag and removed it from the pole. Now here's the interesting part. Glob flew supplies to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. He swore to protect the American flag, and here you see him folding the Cuban flag with a Cuban citizen and shaking hands when they're done.
You always respect the other man's flag. You always respect the other man when you're in their country. We may have disagreements, but human respect, and we've already learned on this mission, they're very proud people. You never let a flag hit the ground.
It was a moving moment, knowing Glob's history and the significance behind his actions. Perhaps it's a sign of things to come. And speaking of things to come, next week I'll share more from the trip to Cuba, including a look at some of how the culture and agriculture is moving to the population centers, just like here in the States.
The controversial Waters of the U.S. rule, which would give the EPA oversight over any and all bodies of water, has been held back by a logjam in Congress and court rulings. However, according to one official, the dam may be finally breaking with this election cycle. Louisiana Representative Charles Bustani says he has voted twice in the House to repeal WOTUS, only to see a lack of Senate action. In the meantime, while Bustani is unsure how the courts will decide on the rule, he is sure that something will change after November of this year.
So it's not been implemented yet, but it's hanging out there, and we don't know which way that court's going to rule. So elections have consequences. Who wins the presidential election will matter. What the composition of the U.S. Senate looks like will matter.
As recently as December, the Government Accountability Office issued a statement that the EPA violated anti-lobbying and anti-propaganda rules in its efforts to push WOTUS. The ruling has been panned by agriculture groups, including Farm Bureau, as a means of adding regulation and expense for farmers and even homeowners.
In 2009, the Louisiana beef industry brought in about $330 million to the state's economy. In 5 years, that number grew to almost $800 million. To keep this industry moving forward, the Louisiana Farm Bureau Livestock Advisory Committee takes farmers and ranchers on a tour of cattle operations in other states. As TWILA's Carl Wiggers shows us, this year, those Louisiana cattle producers visited our neighbors in Mississippi.
From stocker cattle operations to ranches producing top-notch genetics, the Louisiana Farm Bureau's tour of Mississippi had a lot to offer Louisiana cattlemen. Chairman of the Louisiana Farm Bureau Livestock Committee, Marty Wooldridge, helped arrange this 4-day trip through the Mississippi hills.
What we're trying to do on these trips is inspire our producers, educate our producers, try to get them to take a little something back to Louisiana see that somebody else is doing it and say, hey, we can do this back in our part of the world too.
A lot of educating happened right here on the first stop at Mississippi State University's Animal Research Center. The head of the Animal and Dairy Sciences, Dr. John Blanton, shared with ranchers about his department's focus on today's producers.
In Mississippi, economic development and support of our farmers to make sure that they have long-term sustainability, both economically and production-wise, is important. So we focus on that applied research that can have an immediate impact.
Mississippi State professors shared with the Louisiana group about their research in reproductive health and breeding genetics. The tour continues in West Point, Mississippi at Town Creek Farm. Joy Resnicek is proud of their herd of registered Brangus and Ultra Black cattle.
These aren't your grandpa's Brangus.
Town Creek Farm aims to give their customers a bull that will produce a consistent calf when he leaves West Point.
We do a lot of across-the-board breeding, and that's how we prove our bulls. If that bull will work on a lot of different types of cows, he's going to leave us bull calves that will work on a lot of different types of cow herds out in the country.
The next stop was at Rogers Bar HR Ranch in Collins, Mississippi. Cattle is king in this part of the state. For owner of Rogers Bar HR, Doug Rogers, his Charolais cattle is what sets him apart.
What my little niche in life is the purebred Charolais herd. I also run a bunch of commercial cattle too.
In more than 50 years, the Rogers family has grown their Charolais herd to be one of the best in the country. To strengthen his pure breed genetics, Rogers matches bulls and cows himself.
We select breed. I'd look at every cow and I determine which bull I put her with. That's how we breed.
There's a value for all cattle, where it's a high-end top cattle or where it's a low-end cattle, and they're making everything work.
The last stop on the tour was Rocking Bee Ranch. Located in Wiggins, Mississippi, the Batson family has built a reputation for their registered Pole Brahman genetics.
The Mississippi Farm Bureau has been an intricate part. They're with us every day on this trip. Some of their staff, John's with us. But the people out here and the hospitality, opening their homes, serving us dinner, serving us lunch, taking care of us, showing us around has really been unbelievable on this trip.
To see pictures from each stop of the trip, head over to our website at twilatv.org. Planning for next year's trip to Arkansas and Missouri is already underway. Registration for that trip will begin towards the end of the summer. Avery, Kristen, you've been on the trip. You know how much fun it is. You see lots of ranches, lots of different operations, but you also get to eat a lot of really, really good food.
Oh yeah, you've got a lot of brisket. I used to get a lot of steak on the trips, but you said you got a lot of brisket on this one.
Lots of brisket. We had a kind of a hamburger steak type thing one night, but food was great. Company was great. I learned a lot not being from a cattle operation. It was really cool.
What was your favorite stop on the trip?
My favorite stop was probably Rogers Bar HR because of the, I just really liked Doug Rogers. I thought he was very educational and loved telling his story about his farm. They were all great stops though. It's hard to say a favorite.
Well, you'll be taking some notes for next year's trip to Arkansas, Missouri.
Hoping I get to go.
All right, thanks a lot, Carl Wiggers.
Young up-and-coming farmers often need inspiration before they plunge headfirst into the vegetable growing game.
Such a group from Mississippi traveled to Point Coupee Parish to visit the vegetable farm of Lester Williams. As TWILA's A.J. Sabine shows us, Williams showed them it doesn't take much to make a big splash with farm-raised vegetables.
When you get more money, you're going to do whatever it takes.
In a patch of ground filled with newly planted carrots and bell peppers, Lester Williams explains the finer points of vegetable production to this group of young, emerging farmers. Armed with questions, this group traveled all the way from Mississippi to learn from Williams, who sells his produce directly to consumers. Mississippi Association of Cooperatives field specialist Darnella Winston says she brought this group to Point Coupee Parish for a little inspiration.
That it doesn't take a whole lot of acreage to get started in farming. You can use what you already have if you don't have any acreage. If you have a half an acre or if you just have just some plots, you can get started in growing vegetables or get started in growing fruit trees or anything that's productive in the vegetable area.
Getting productive in the dirt is what this group is all about. 17-year-old Nyla Turnbull jumped on the opportunity to tour working cattle ranches and vegetable farms. Ultimately, she wants her own cattle ranch one day.
When I get older, I want to be a veterinarian, so when I move to Texas, I want to start raising cattle.
So why did you come all the way from the great state of Mississippi all the way to Point Coupee Parish?
Just to see what other farmers were doing with their cattle and to see what would help me learn to raise cattle.
Lester Williams says these young people represent the future of his industry. That's why he's excited to mentor them during this stop on their ag tour.
This is what it's all about. You know, when a young minority can stay away from drugs and be here on out in the field making their own money, honest money. That's the best thing they can do. And I don't mind giving people the advice because, you know, I had to start somewhere, you know, and trying to help other people is one of the best things you can ever do because I'm getting older and we need other people to get involved in it. Vegetable growing, vegetable right now is getting to be one of the top things around, and we need more vegetable growers.
Boca Chica, Mississippi cattle rancher Joe Barnes summed up the lesson of this stop on the tour.
In the past, everyone was encouraged to have large scale, to do farming on a large scale. He is a great example of how you can just do it on a small scale and be viable.
Williams told the group that diversity, even among the same types of vegetables, will ensure strong consumer sales. The visit by the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives was the third such trip to Louisiana by young, minority, or socially disadvantaged persons who are interested in starting an ag business. Now, speaking of advancing vegetable production, test plots or small plantings on private farms used for research often prove invaluable to scientists who study the performance of row crops such as rice or soybeans. However, an award-winning LSU horticulturalist says test plots can be especially helpful when researching new varieties of vegetables. LSU horticulturalist Dr. Catherine Fontenot says that test plots not only aid in vegetable research, but such research ultimately benefits home gardeners as well. Fontenot explains that researchers breed vegetable cultivars in specific regions of the state as well as around the country, such as California. The research done on test plots, as you see here, ultimately determine which seed you will find at your local feed store. Fontenot says the payoff of test plots could determine how much actual produce winds up on your table.
It's important for us to try out all the varieties here so that we can see on a small scale what works and what doesn't work, because you'd hate to plant a whole acre of one type of carrots and you only get, say, a third of the production when you could have planted another variety and gotten the whole field to produce.
Earlier this year, Dr. Fontenot won the prestigious John E. Hutchinson Extension Award from the Southern Region of the American Society for Horticultural Science. The award is presented to individuals early in their careers to recognize outstanding and valuable contributions in horticulture. We certainly want to congratulate Kiki Fontenot, as she's affectionately known, on her achievement. Now, if you would like more information about carrots or test plots or the Louisiana Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association, please log on to our website at twilatv.org. And guys, it's so refreshing to see young people who really have an interest in fruits and vegetables.
And I know you and Kiki Fontenot have been friends for a long time. Tell me a little bit about how you feel about her getting that award and seeing the achievements she's done.
Avery, Kristen, you guys know Kiki. She's such a wonderful person. She's very, very passionate about horticulture and fruits and vegetables and really getting people getting their hands dirty and growing their own food. So I couldn't be more happy for her. No one that I know of has more passion about fruits and vegetables.
I know, you might. Maybe. Thank you very much, AJ Sabine. Well, still to come on TWILA.
When a grilled cheese rules the internet, trending on TWILA is next. Stay with us.
In this week's Trending on TWILA segment, we take you online to see what people are posting about agriculture on social media.
April 12th was National Grilled Cheese Day, and people were tweeting photos and recipes of this classic American sandwich to celebrate on social media.
The USDA Ag Marketing Service tweeted this photo with the caption, "It wouldn't be National Grilled Cheese Day without our dairy farmers," a very important message that all cheese lovers should remember.
Other food companies and commodity groups like the National Pork Producers Council also posted tweets to capitalize on the popularity of the grilled cheese while promoting their products.
Speaking of pork, the Animal Agriculture Alliance posted this infographic debunking the myth that farmers use hormones in pig production. The post went viral on Facebook this week.
This Facebook page is a great resource for consumers to learn why farmers are using various production methods and to better understand how your food is produced.
Another post that gained a lot of attention on social media came from our very first Farm Fact Friday post. Last Friday, we posted this infographic showing how many miles and bees it takes to produce 1 jar of honey.
Each Friday, we will post a different fun farm fact with the hashtag Farm Fact Friday for all of our followers to share on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
If you have an interesting farm fact that you would like us to share, simply tweet us, post it on our TWILA Facebook page, or you can send it to us on our website at twilatv.org. And I love the response we've gotten already.
It was crazy that many people shared it, responded to it, and it's just interesting that people like graphics and things like that on Facebook.
I think what people like most is learning, and this is a really simple and easy way to teach people.
Well, I'm racking up an arsenal of fun facts that you can share with all of your friends on Facebook and Twitter, so look forward to that every Friday. Well, now moving on to this week's TWILA Trivia. Last time I asked you the juice from which flower was once used to make glue, and the correct answer is A, bluebell. This week our question is, according to Time magazine, which factor affects the gooiness of cheese in a grilled cheese sandwich? Is it A, cooking temperature, B, bread type, or C, cheese pH level? To enter this week's trending trivia contest, simply log on to your Facebook or Twitter account and post your answer with the hashtag TWILA Trivia, or you can always submit your answer on our website at twilatv.org.
I never thought to give my grilled cheese a litmus test. It might work. Anyway, still to come on TWILA, we get the bottom line on what trade with Cuba could look like.
Stay with us. Well, earlier in the show, Avery's trip to Cuba involved a lot of agriculture, not only consuming it, but promoting it in the island nation.
We talked a lot of trade while we were there, and it seems like there's the will both in Cuba and the United States for normal trade to resume. And what happens if that comes to pass? We find out from TWILA's Neil Molasso, who joins us now with this week's Bottom Line. And Neil, I know we talked about the possible avenues of resuming trade, but what happens if we were to completely normalize our relations with Cuba?
Well, as you know, Avery, of course, rice heavily dominated the trip, and it was rice interests that were on that trip. And rice exports to Cuba were huge, and everyone associated with that crop would love to see a return to that pre-embargo era. A return is possible, but in short, it's probably not going to happen right away. To really understand why, we need to look at two things: economics and culture. That's not just the key for rice, that's the key to selling any commodity, agriculture or otherwise, into Cuba. The economic part of it boils down to whether or not Cuba can raise the capital necessary to buy our products. At first, I don't think they will have very much. However, one, this will change over time as the embargo is lifted and they get a lot more U.S. tourists spending money there. Two, as banks will no longer be sanctioned for loaning money to Cuba, the country can expect larger and larger loans. The second part of determining how much Cuba will buy is culture. Now, obviously they love rice. What else? Well, they love eggs, chicken, beef, and pork as well. Here's where we need to take a closer look. They have plenty of pork production there, so they don't have a lot of market potential. Eggs, they raise cheaper by the dozen than the U.S., so our eggs will have a tough time competing there as well. However, they don't have the same kind of production in cows or chickens, so we might get more in the country there. Now, as for the other grains and dairy products, it's a case-by-case basis. How much do Cubans love their butter and café con leche? That's all going to play a part in how much they're willing to buy. The bottom line is, it's going to be a net boon for the U.S. economy and for Louisiana in particular. Not only will our rice producers benefit, but the ports of Lake Charles and New Orleans will see a lot more traffic as well. You might remember my story on Dupuis Storage a few weeks back. Well, facilities like that can store all of these commodities coming downriver and from Louisiana will certainly see a lot more business, as well as some of our plants like our poultry producing plants up in North Louisiana. And guys, you know, as you saw on that trip, rice was a major part of that trip, but really getting to see Cuba, the culture, what people are eating, what people are wearing, what people are driving, all of that kind of stuff is going to play in what we can trade with them.
And I think what a lot of people also need to realize is even though it was Louisiana and Arkansas represented on this trip, the Midwest would be a big winner here as well, because even though we produce a lot of soybeans and a lot of corn in Louisiana and Arkansas, we don't produce enough to be able to sell to them. We have all the port facilities here downriver. It's everyone along the Mississippi River, which is why they really need to contact their congressman.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think we also need to think about is, you know, it's been 60 years since that embargo was put in place. Cuba is getting a lot of those commodities from other countries. So it's not exactly going to be the same trading field as what we saw pre-embargo, but hopefully we will get a major part of that business.
I think we will. Thank you very much, Neil Molasso.
Well, that does it for this edition of TWILA. Be sure to join us next week when we'll head back to New Orleans to feast on agriculture at the Irish House.
Until then, you can watch all of our stories online on our website at twilatv.org, and be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter.
For all of us here at TWILA, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again right here next week.